As some of you may recall, last year Steve and I stumbled across a shrine in Necedah, Wisconsin that began to raise more questions than it ever answered. Since I'm currently furloughed from work and am literally dying to have something productive to do with my time, I decided now would be a good time to start telling that story and sharing what I've learned. I've been researching the history of Necedah, the shrine, the members, following the news stories, digging through archives from like the 50s, doing deep dives on the internet to find out, what is going on. And I think I have a pretty good story here. So I'm planning on having this project go on for a few weeks, sending out video installments so I can kind of make sure I have everything in place where it needs to be. I hope that you hang around for the entirety because it just gets better with time as the rabbit hole deepens. So I'm going to do the logical thing and start where every story should, in the beginning. This story begins with Steve and I driving back from Milwaukee, Wisconsin late last year after having spent the weekend visiting with my brother, sister-in-law, and goddaughter. Anyone who knows me or has ever been in a car with me is aware of how much I absolutely hate driving on freeways, so we decided to take some windy back roads to get home. It was a mid-Sunday afternoon, the sun was out, and, well, we had nowhere else to be. About 2.5, 3 hours into our journey, Steve and I were getting pretty restless in the car and needed to find a place to get out and stretch our legs. The vast majority of the road that we had been driving on went through farmland, forests, plains, but there weren't many towns that we had seen. We made the executive decision that the next area we saw that we could stop at, we would. A few miles down, up along the right-hand side of the road, I noticed a tattered billboard advertising a shrine just outside of Necedah. It was only a few miles away and appeared to fit our needs for providing a place to get out of the car. I remember turning to Steve and asking him if he'd ever seen a Catholic shrine before, and he shook his head. Well, it was decided. That's where we were going. We were going to go to the shrine, stretch out, and get ready to finish the rest of the trip home. 2 equally shabby billboards later, we saw a smaller wooden sign on the left-hand side of the road, indicating that we should turn down a gravel drive to get to our destination. The road definitely needed a little TLC, and Steve cracked a joke about my driving as I did my best to dodge the largest of the potholes. As we drove up the road, it split into 2 directions. We could either go straight on the aptly named Shrine Road or fork off to the left. We could see the faintest hint of some sort of structure behind an upcoming cemetery if we were to go straight, so we continued onward. As we reached the cemetery on our left-hand side, we slowed down to take a look at the statue that was guarding the entrance. The cemetery itself could not have been housing more than 20 deceased residents, but there was this large, ornate statue at the front depicting an angel and a man. I'm no religious scholar since I haven't been to church since I was a kid, so I'm not sure who the figure was depicting, but it did seem like an oddly fancy structure to be standing at the entrance of such a modest cemetery. We continued past the cemetery and pulled up to a small, circular parking lot with one other vehicle present. We parked alongside the other vehicle and got out, just thankful to be able to stretch our legs. The first thing that we noticed was how eerily quiet it was at the shrine. There was a man and his 2 children circling the grounds quietly, but there was nothing else to be heard. Not even the sound of birds pierced the void. I shot Steve a side-eyed glance. He shot me one back. We shrugged and began to walk towards the entrance. The first thing we came up to out of the parking lot was the visitor center, which is this large stone structure, kind of beaten down, that was closed. It was Sunday, which is God's day of rest, so we kind of figured that was attributing to it. We peeked through the windows and there were some books, some pamphlets, some rosaries. There was bottled water from the shrine that you could purchase that apparently had been blessed. As you came around the back side of the visitor center, there was this big sign that was attached, reading, "These are sacred grounds." The Mother of God graced these grounds with her presence for a period of 34 years. She promised to continue to visit and bless these premises on the following days each year: April 7th, May 28th, May 29th, May 30th, June 4th, June 16th, August 15th, October 7th, and November 12th. Are you dressed properly? Our Blessed Mother has said that many fashions are displeasing to our Lord. She is the model of modesty. Clothing should conceal, not reveal. Both men and women should observe the virtue of modesty. We are given the choice to follow Christian standards of morality or follow the pagan standards of immorality. History reveals that when the morals of a nation collapse, the nation collapses. For women visitors wearing shorts or slacks, wraparound skirts are available. As the women go, so goes the nation. So it's a little disconcerting that on the side of the visitor center would be something kind of out there. I understand that modesty is very important, but next to the sign, they had this big, large armoire of really old, dusty, gross wraparound skirts that apparently were there for people to use if they weren't modest. I was in sweatpants, so technically I probably should have grabbed one, but I didn't, especially since there didn't appear to be any attendants. So we walked past the skirts and the sign and entered the grounds. As we entered the shrine grounds, the first thing that you pass is a big, large cross structure built into the grounds surrounded by flowers. At first glance, when you're looking out into the shrines, you see these weird kind of like displays that are in a circle with big glass fronts and figurines that are within them. And you kind of walk the grounds in a circle to get a look at all of them. They have little placards in front of them. And then there's this big towering structure behind everything else. It's this big half-finished concrete structure that you can't really tell what it's supposed to be from the outside. So the next thing that we did was we looked at the first cross. Although I don't have pictures of all of the different shrine depictions, I do have several of them. The first thing you come upon when you enter into the shrine is the first mass shrine, which depicts Jesus and his disciples. It was kind of a sunny day, so you can kind of see Steve and I's reflection in the image, but in the back left-hand corner, you'll see a little Judas cowering. They have a little chart on the bottom right-hand corner that states who is where, and they're these strange like plaster or plastic figurines, but the inside of the shrines themselves are pristine, as if everything has been pressed. Everything is clean. There's no dust, and every single shrine had like lit candles that were actively going inside of them. So this was a place that was tended to. This shrine depicts Joan of Arc. There were, like I said, there were quite a few different ones that were available. The weird thing is, though, is as you walk into the shrine grounds, there's nothing really explaining what is going on. You know, you have the sign stating that you must be modest because God and Mother Mary recommend it or require it. You have statues of, you know, there's Joan of Arc, there's Jesus, there's the crucifixion, there's one of a lady named Mary Ann Van Hoof. There's one of a friar near the front, but it seems like there's a lot of different corresponding shrines, but they don't all interact well with one another. Sprinkled along the walkways, there were these tiny little cutouts with little Marys inside of them out of porcelain that kind of lit the way. Some of them had candles, some of them had figurines like this one does. And generally at the feet of every Mary, there's these tiny little candies, you know, your butterscotches or your mints, as if, you know, they're trying to please the Mother Mary with little sugary sweets. As we continued along the shrines, they began to get progressively darker in a sense. Here we have imagery of Jesus carrying the crucifix. The shrine is built into a big, large stone grotto where you have to actually walk around the back end, and this is built into that mountain. Another image that they had in one of the shrines was Christ being crucified, which we have pictured here. Again, the sun was really not my friend when I was taking these images, but it's a relatively grotesque imagery, and the words at the bottom are talking about, you know, his passion and how he suffered, and there's a lot of emphasis on suffering if you read a lot of the different placards at the various shrines. As we made our rounds through the shrine grounds, there's this looming stone structure that's kind of highlighting the background of everything, and here's a closer picture of it. It's supposed to end up being a house of worship. It's something that volunteers are working on the weekend with to be built, but I think they started construction in like the 70s according to the sign, and it doesn't appear that they've gotten very far. We tried to get as close as we could. On the other side of the stone structure, because it is kind of this big circular build up with not a lot else going for it, you can see the weeds and nature is just kind of overtaken on the inside. There's some stuff placed down on the ground as if they're trying to build the flooring. Maybe it's just some foundation work, but it doesn't look like anything had been done in there for probably the last I would say almost decade. A lot of the scaffolding is rusty. There's wood planks blocking off areas that could be dangerous. Those were moldy and falling apart. So it might be something that they're actively working on, but not a lot from the tells of it. In an attempt to kind of illustrate what the house of worship is supposed to look like, I was able to find this map of the shrine grounds of what it's supposed to be. Eventually, one day, it's kind of shaped like a heart. It's got a big tower attached to it, and there's kind of heart-shaped windows. So that's the ultimate plan for the house of worship that was started in the 70s. But as you can tell from the picture, there hasn't been a lot of progress being made. Smack dab in the middle of the entrance to where the house of worship would be is the statues of Jesus as king standing on top of the world with our forefathers George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. This is actually called, I believe, For My God and Country is like the name of the shrine. I'm going to get more into the name of that because that delves into a whole nother spectrum of the shrine's business. But the George Washington statue on the left-hand side has one of his prayers listed, and on the right-hand side it has Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Here's another image of the statues of Jesus, Washington, and Lincoln. The flag that is behind them is constantly kept at half-mast in honor of all the babies that are killed by abortions. As you pass the forefathers and move onward, you see this statue of Mary, and this is actually an original piece of the shrine. As you get closer to the shrine, you kind of find out a little bit more of the history and why these are here. What had happened is a woman named Mary Ann Van Hoof had visions of Mary for, well, over the course of 34 years. And this shrine here is a depiction of how she had seen Mary in her first vision, which was actually on the grounds itself. A little further down from the statue of Mary, you can see that there is an actual sign stating it is a place of prayer. In later visits with Steve and I, we actually did get to see some of this in action. There are services gathered there every Sunday morning, and on special dates, especially when Mary is said to return, they do gather in front of the house of worship and in front of the Mary statue. So before I go further into more on the details of what we experienced, because shit's about to get weird here in a little bit, just a few things to note. So when you walk into the grounds, you see all these different shrines, and there's not a lot of information available on them. There is one shrine that I was unable to get a picture of, which depicts Mary Ann Van Hoof kneeling on the ground and being visited by Mother Mary, which is kind of where all of this stemmed from. So the shrine grounds themselves were actually where Mrs. Van Hoof had resided, and had been visited by the Blessed Mother a handful of times, along with over 100 different saints that she had seen and supposedly had come to visit her. So everything that's kind of been built up around on the shrine grounds were different things that she had seen, people that had, saints that had visited her, angels that had visited her, the Blessed Mary that had visited her. And the idea was that through these messages, she would build this ground up and create this house of worship for everyone to come to and be a part of. As you've seen from the pictures, nothing has really changed since the 70s, but there were signs noted stating that they're still working on building the grounds on Saturdays with volunteers. So I have not visited on a Saturday because I have no intention to, but supposedly they are still working on this at this time. As you continue past the house of worship, you come across this sign guarding a plot, which is the sacred spot, the place of apparition, and this is where Mary Ann Van Hoof was said to have received a vision and message from Mary on more than one occasion, but this spot in particular is like the one spot. This is the first spot. The house that you can see behind it is where she lived with her family. We found out later on that her original house had actually burned to the ground, but they had rebuilt this one the exact same way as how she had lived in it back in the day. This is Mary Ann Van Hoof. I have in my hand a pamphlet regarding the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which I'm going to read from to give a little bit of a background. Mary Ann, mother of 8, was first favored with a visitation of Our Lady on November 12, 1949, shortly after she had retired for the night. She was terribly frightened. The Blessed Mother spoke not a word. April 7, 1950, as Mary Ann saw the crucifix on her wall glowing beautifully, a voice said to her, "Yes, pray, my child. Pray, pray, pray hard. My child, your cross is heavy to bear, but the people all over the world are facing a heavier cross and sorrow with the enemy of God unless you pray. Pray hard with all of your heart, devotedly. Instructions were given her concerning her parish priest and relatives. The Mother of God warned her she would be laughed at and ridiculed. She then promised to return again when the flowers bloom and the trees and grass are green. True to her promise, the Queen of Heaven appeared to Mary Ann on May 28, 1950, Pentecost Sunday. "Oh, she was so radiant and beautiful," explained Mary Ann. "An artist couldn't paint her to do her justice." Again the next day on May 29th, the Blessed Mother came and spoke to Mary Ann. "Wake up, America," the Mother of God pleaded. "The enemy of God is creeping all over America." Our Lady wondered why the people turned their backs upon her and her messages. She said that all people must work together in prayer. All religions must work together against the enemy of God. You must love thy neighbor and live the commandments, the way of the cross, not just try. You must love my divine Son above all earthly goods. You must pray and convert Russia, and you shall have peace. On May 30th, June 4th, June 16th, August 15th, and October 7th, the Mother of God again visited and talked to Mary Ann. The Queen of Heaven promised Mary Ann that she would return every year on those chosen days, also on Trinity Sunday, for as long as Mary Ann lived. The Mother of God faithfully kept her promise. Not only did the Mother of God appear to Mary Ann, but also the Blessed Trinity and over 100 saints. Messages from Our Lady and the Celestials are filled with requests, predictions, revelations, warnings, and solutions to the myriad of problems which face us in these precarious times. Through the years, Mary Ann endured extreme suffering, during which she envisioned and suffered the passion of our Lord. She viewed also the Last Supper and the overwhelming beauty and solemnity of the first Mass. As a victim soul suffering for the sins of others, Mary Ann endured pain day and night. Her suffering allowed her to sleep only 10 or 15 minutes at a time. What a tremendous value was the suffering of this stalwart lady. Who can comprehend it? Mary Ann Van Hoof, with wounds from the crown of thorns, which became visible between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock p.m. on a Friday of Lent in 1951. These wounds were visible in Lent 1951 and Lent 1952. After that time, she suffered the wounds inwardly only. 14 beautiful shrines built at the request of the Blessed Mother grace this special place of apparitions at the present time. Plans are being drawn for additional shrines which have been requested. These shrines contain exquisite life-size statues which bring inspiration to the steady flow of visitors arriving by car or chartered bus. Daily, volunteer guides are available on the shrine grounds to explain the Blessed Mother's messages and respond to any inquiries. On these flower-bedecked grounds, it is possible to retrace the footsteps of St. Therese herself, who revealed to Mary Ann, "I often walk these grounds." Also, literature concerning the urgent and vitally important messages from heaven are distributed to visitors of all faiths, fulfilling one of our Heavenly Mother's requests to bring the truth to all people. So, in theory, she was seeing apparitions of Mary and passing her messages along. In later on videos, we will talk more about the one apparition that she had, the vision where she had over 100,000 people packed into her Necedah farm. There's pictures and video proof of that. But the weird part is, especially in reading a lot of these texts, like I have the books, is there is a lot of talk about converting Russia to a specific form of Catholicism, and how if we don't, the world's going to end in nuclear war. There's a lot of that. Even in the imagery, the shrine with Washington and Lincoln and Jesus, there's references to the Cold War too. So one thing you're going to notice through these videos is there are a lot of reoccurring themes of Cold War concerns, which I think definitely play a part because it does grow more into fear-mongering later on, especially through the messages. So hang in there. It's about to get weird. As you continue down the path toward Mrs. Van Hoof's original home, or, well, more aptly named the replica of it now, you pass the St. Michael Shrine. It depicts St. Michael murdering what I'm guessing is a demon of some sort or some depiction of the devil. What's weird though is if you look in the background. Now on the right hand side, you see a family praying before a fireplace in front of a statue of Jesus. On the left hand side, you see a mushroom cloud from nuclear war. Uh, and you can't see all of the imagery down on the left, but there's like people burning and dying as well. The weird thing though is, like, I had mentioned there was a lot of talk about the Cold War and nuclear war, and I had mentioned early, especially with the crucifixion shrines, as there's a lot of depictions of violence, like grotesque violence, which seems to be an occurring theme in a lot of the different things that they've created here. Her replicated house is blocked off, so you're not able to go up to it, but the closest you can get is this big giant window partition that depicts this imagery. Again, the sun was not in my favor when I was taking pictures. It's Mary standing before a bunch of dolls. And I have no way to explain it. I don't get it. I think it's very, very creepy. The second time that we came back to the Necedah shrine, it has been removed since then. But there is a part of me that's very curious as to what this is supposed to be representative of, if it's Mary talking to the children, or I don't know what people's obsession are with dolls. So by the time that Steve and I got to the dolls, we're kind of creeped out. So we've seen a lot of different imagery. We've seen a lot of shrines. We've got some information. We don't have a lot of it. But something about that house was just super, super creepy. And we just kind of started to have this uneasy feeling. So the rest of the images that I have are us walking back out of the shrine and kind of picking up on a few things that we missed a little bit earlier. You're going to have to excuse my imagery because these were Snapchats that I had sent to document it, because towards the end of it, we kind of felt like we were going to get murdered. One thing to notice, so this is the house of worship in the side of it. There is a running AC unit attached to the outside, but the structure itself is not completed. Now, this drove us to kind of go a little bit closer to the grounds themselves, and you notice kind of on the left-hand side of the picture that there is a window. We went and looked into a couple of the different windows, and there's actually pews set up underneath as if there is a mass or something that's held there. The weird part for us, though, is that we don't understand where the AC unit would be running to or what it's running for, because it may be the middle of the summer, but it's the second level and half of it's submerged underground. So I mean, it's relatively cool in the first place. So that was the first thing that was kind of disconcerting for us. The next thing that we noticed on our way walking out of the shrine grounds was there were a lot of different loudspeakers kind of put up throughout the grounds. Since whenever they were originally in use, they were disconnected. We did find a couple of different boxes for like wires and stuff for everything to attach to, but they had been gutted and were empty, which kind of made us wonder what would be the point of having loudspeakers at the shrine grounds. The other thing that we found really interesting that raised more questions than answers was this outtake vent type thing that was dead in the middle of the grounds. I'm guessing that it's an exhaust of some sort, but it's weird because there's nothing else around it. It's in the middle of the grounds. We could hear air coming out of it, but that doesn't really indicate what it's for. So Steve and I had kind of talked about it back and forth, and we have a couple of theories. First of all, there's a structure underground there somewhere. We're just not sure what it is. With all of the Cold War information that we had found and all the prayers and messages relating to the Cold War and nuclear war, we're kind of wondering if the grounds might have like a bunker underneath it in the off chance that there is a nuclear war. So by the time that Steve and I got to the dolls, we're kind of creeped out. So we've seen a lot of different imagery. We've seen a lot of shrines. We've got some information. We don't have a lot of it. But something about that house was just super, super creepy. And we just kind of started to have this uneasy feeling. So the rest of the images that I have are us walking back out of the shrine and kind of picking up on a few things that we missed a little bit earlier. So that's part one. That is part one. This whole situation has led to me doing a bunch of research, finding a bunch of old articles, reading up on the history of everything that has been found. In future episodes, we're going to go into some of the murder kind of stuff. The lady who was hidden in a bathroom for 2 years as they collected her disability checks, despite warnings from her family to stay away from them. I am going to tell you more about our second visit there, where we confirm that there is a structure underneath the grounds, and we're just going to kind of keep going with it. There's a super deep, super dark history here that has kind of been buried over time. And I think it's about time for the story to come out. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for putting up with my shitty video editing, and I will catch you for the next piece.